Always the ultimate question. Everybody wants to watch the clock or set the app on the phone or something like that to determine how long to feed the baby. I did midwifery in 1986, and in those days we had timed breastfeeds. So day 1 was 3 minutes by 3 minutes, and that baby had 6 feeds a day. Lots of crying going on. Day 2, you went to 5 minutes by 5 minutes, and you can see where I'm going with this. It never worked. So it was probably late 80s, 90s where the concept of demand breastfeeding really started to come in. So there's really no point in watching the clock when you feed a baby. What you have to understand is there's different phases of feeding: nutritive feeding and non-nutritive feeding. So the best way to describe that is when a baby is nutritive feeding, they might have 6 or 7 sucks in a row, like a suck sequence, and then they'll pause. They might have a couple of breaths, they'll swallow, and then they'll resume into another suck sequence. The pattern of suck, swallow, breathe isn't a rhythmic pattern. It's not suck, swallow, breathe. It's much more complicated than that. So a baby might have 6 or 7 sucks before they have a mouthful of milk to swallow. Now, depending on the effort of breathing, they may need a little bit longer to rest before those suck sequences. And eventually, those pause times between the suck sequences becomes longer. Once the pause time is longer than the sucking time, baby's moved into more non-nutritive sucking. And often the pattern you'll see there, they'll just hold on to the breast but they won't be sucking. And they'll do a couple of little flutter sucks, and that's trying to get you to let down your milk again. And then they'll go back into a long pause, and then they'll do a couple more. Mothers always think, I'll just leave you there, you've been doing a good job. Or you might try and detach the baby at that stage and they start sucking like they've never been fed before. But of course, within 30 seconds, they'll have reverted back into the pattern, long pause, a couple of little sucks. At that point, they're not really transferring milk. So it's best to take baby off, and baby can be off at the other breast. Babies gain weight by volume of milk, not by how much fat is in the milk. So we don't feed a baby according to how much fat we think is in the breast now. A baby only gains weight by volume of milk. So it's more important to start on the first breast, feed until we've moved into non-nutritive sucking, take the baby off. You might sit baby up on your knee, give them a little opportunity to burp, and then go to the breast that's the second breast, which has then got more milk available in it.
That's such a common question. Mums always want to know that, because when you're breastfeeding, there's no signal on the side of your breast that tells you how much milk is there. You kind of have to just work out reading baby's signals. So generally at this sort of by the first week, we're expecting about 5 or 6 wet nappies and 2 or 3 poos in a day. Obviously it's less in the early days, but going on towards 6 weeks, we generally want that to be the pattern of every day. We're also expecting babies to be settled in between feeds, so they come off the breast and they're not actively searching all the time. They're spending times where they're actually quite settled. They fall asleep, they're happy. We worry about some babies that are overly tired and sleepy, that they're actually sleepy because they're trying to conserve their energy. So we're wanting babies to be alert and active at times. We're wanting them to have lots of dirty nappies. The other thing that we look at as well is their weight gain, that they are consistently gaining weight over a period of time. Generally, we're looking at about 20 to 30 grams a day, on average about 150 to 250 grams a week. But weight isn't everything. We're looking at babies growing, getting bigger, getting more responsive. Those are all sorts of things we look at in an assessment.
Normal breastfeed can be 8, 10, 12 times a day. The baby's gut is designed to absorb or digest the breast milk very quickly. So often after an hour and a half or 2 hours, the baby has digested the majority of the feed and they're looking for more milk again. So it's completely normal. Changes in the patterning of feeding, you shouldn't see that necessarily as something that's going wrong. It's very common for each day to be quite different with the number of feeds, but certainly we're looking for 7, 8 minimum, but you may find you're having periods where you're feeding 8, 10, 12 times a day. Often in the afternoon also we see cluster feeding, and it may be related to the amount of milk that's available in the breast. But babies might want to feed every hour, hour and a half. It's often over dinner time, which is difficult. So if that's the pattern that you find your baby is doing, you need to have a think about how you're going to prepare your morning to be able to enjoy that part of the afternoon. Because it is enjoyable and it's what baby needs, and we need to be responsive to that. It may not fit in with how things have been at home prior to having a baby, but you need to learn what your baby's pattern is and then work your day around fitting in with your baby. When you leave hospital, within a couple of days your feeding pattern may have changed. So babies may be a little sleepier in the first couple of days after birth, and then they start to be more wakeful, and we need to respond to those more frequent requests for feeding. There's also times through the first 3 to 6 months where feeding patterns will change again, and we often attribute it to a growth spurt, but in fact it's related to a developmental stage. For example, around 3 months babies become very distracted with breastfeeding. So during the day they start feeding, they pull off, they look around, they laugh at everybody that walks in the door. Very frustrating for mothers sometimes. But that baby is developing normally. However, their night feeds become more important at that time because they're not taking in as much food during the day. So even if your baby may have been sleeping longer periods of time, they might get around that 3-month period and start to be wakeful again. And it's important we understand that's a developmental stage, it's not a baby taking a step back.